everyone. Welcome to another episode of Love Encompassed podcast. I am your host, Victoria.
And Phil, of course.
And we are so excited to do this episode because, babe, what are we talking about?
Today, we are talking about what we would tell ourselves at the very beginning of marriage.
Oh, yeah.
Not at the beginning of the relationship. Because you have to watch the other episodes to figure out what we thought or what I thought at the beginning of the relationship. But what would you tell yourself now or then what you know now?
You know, when we were talking about what we were going to talk about, because we try to, have it obviously in advance, prepared and all that good stuff.
It's for the best.
Yeah. You don't ever want to come in winging it. So when you told me that's what you wanted to talk about this episode, I'm not gonna lie, I was trying to think, and I was a little stumped. I had to really think. So I want you to go first because I'm curious.
Yeah. So I think, there's a couple things. One, I would tell myself, she's always this sassy. So just deal with it in life. No, I'm just kidding. I think what I would tell myself when at the very beginning was it's okay to be vulnerable. Because I think that was kind of the hardest thing for me at the very beginning was figuring out can I be vulnerable?
And why do you think that was? Was it because of your past experiences?
Yeah, I think it was just from the past and from if I would have known then, hey, if you open up, if you I feel like I would have got to a healthier place faster.
So I helped you get healthy?
Yep.
So that's good to know. I'm glad that I provided that space for you to do that. So what were some things that I did that helped you, get to the place of being okay, I'm safe with her?
I think, honestly, it was just trusting in your love. And I think that's hard sometimes for couples. I don't think people really admit to it, but I think it is hard. It's I think I always waited for the shoe to drop in life. You know how things go good for a while and then you're just something's going to happen, right? Things are going, it's things are going too good right now. And I think it was oh my gosh, I found this wonderful person. Oh my God, she agreed to marry me. She actually said yes, which I say to you all the time now. I'm hey, thank you for saying yes.
I know. When you would say that, I'm what do you keep saying thank you? That's so weird.
Right. But I think it's but you're just waiting. It's okay, what's going to happen? If she finds out the real me, what is she going to do? When I, let my guard down or I make a mistake or I screw up or I do something, is she going to be all right, I'm gone. So I think telling myself then, hey, she's not going to leave. I think I would have got to that spot quicker.
Do you feel like that was a fear of yours because that's what happened with your mom? Or do you feel that weight that you carried, oh my gosh, if I do something, if I mess up, if I don't, show up in a way that, maybe she's expecting she's going to leave. Why was that your go-to? Do you think that came from what happened with your mom?
I don't know if it's necessarily what happened with my mom. I think it's just me in general. I think dealing with insecurities, dealing with everything. So it's kind of you didn't feel like you were worthy enough. I didn't feel like I was worthy enough for somebody to really love me. Nor do I think it's I think when you first get together with people, and even when you're honeymooning, right? You're in the honeymoon phase. It's you don't really get comfortable with somebody,
Even when we were friends for as long as we were friends.
Yeah, I think there's still
or do you see it as, I'm sorry, or was it more yes, I was comfortable with you as friends, but because now I'm in this relationship, it's a different.
I think when you living with somebody, there's always that, that first time you get sick. You know what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about throwing up. I'm
Oh
talking
my
about the
gosh.
first time you
Yeah.
get sick. And you're like, so there's always that awkwardness, right? And I think that's just one thing, but I think there's other things that like it creates awkwardness, and then in your mind you start thinking like, oh my gosh, if I tell them this, or oh my gosh, if I like this and I tell them I like it, is that gonna make me whatever, or they're gonna be like, what, and judge you for it.
Mm.
And I think I always kind of dealt with that, like not feeling comfortable with somebody. Not that I didn't feel comfortable in rooms with people,
Mm.
but I think that's all surface
It's a
level.
different set of vulnerability. I get it.
Yeah, I think it's surface level. So I think it's when it's deeper, it's like, oh man, you're really kind of opening up your heart that way.
I get it. I can understand that. I can understand that. Well, I'm glad that I made you feel comfortable enough to like breathe and like
Yeah, I think that's what I'm saying. That's why I would tell myself, like, hey, you could get healthier a lot quicker if you were way more honest. And I think any couples or anything, I think the quicker you are to get honest
mm,
is the quicker you will grow, and the quicker you'll be happy, and the quicker because just not being honest or not allowing yourself to get there is always kind of like you're putting up a little bit of a wall.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
So what about you?
Oh
What
my
would you
gosh,
tell
that's what I
yourself how
said. I
hot
was
he
like,
is? He's always going to be that hot.
um,
He's awesome.
I would tell myself that you're consistent.
Okay.
So,
I was kind of hoping you would say hot.
well, I wouldn't have married you if I didn't think you were a good-looking guy.
Okay, so there it is. That wraps up the podcast. That's all we needed.
I mean, obviously, I married you for other reasons, but I mean, you still have to have some kind of level of attraction.
Yeah.
You
So
know?
consistent.
Consistency. So the reason why I say that is because, like I remember, like right before we got married, the months leading up to that, and I mean, I found it interesting that you were like, letting your guard down. I felt like as long as we were friends and as long as we knew each other before we went to the next phase of being engaged and then married, I didn't feel like you had a quote unquote guard up. And now I understand when you kind of like explained it more. You meant like vulnerability wise,
Right.
but I knew you were a really great person. I think because I saw my parents' relationship was toxic, and then I saw other people around me who didn't really have healthy relationships in my family. And then you hear people say, "Oh, that's how they were in the beginning," but then they change. And so when it got closer to us getting married, I did get nervous. I was nervous because I was like, am I doing the right thing? All these different thoughts that came through because of the stories that you've heard other people say. Like, what is it really going to be like? Is it going to change?
Right.
And so for the longest in the beginning, I was concerned with that. That was something that I was concerned with. And so I would tell myself that you're consistent. Like in all of our years of being together, I know we say it a lot because we're proud of it. This year will be 19 years for us. You've been consistent, and you've been consistent in the way you love me. You've been consistent in keeping your word. You've been consistent in just who you are as a person. And in the moments where, if you're being human, and if I ever did bring it to your attention, you were quick to like own up to it, take accountability for it, and that was just something I wasn't used to. So, or
Do you think in those moments, do you think that like, did you ever in those moments, was it like when the consistency wasn't there or something happened, do you think it triggered you to where you're like, oh, here we go. I knew it. I knew it.
It didn't trigger me to be like, oh, here we go. It did trigger me and protect.
Ah, that's a good point.
So it was like,
In your famous words, what you not gonna do?
it wasn't
What
even
you not
sometimes,
gonna do?
I think it depended upon the situation, how I reacted to it, right? I think in the beginning, like that one time we talked about in one of our episodes where you said something and I was like, oh, heck no, because it triggered
Yeah.
some stuff from childhood as, feeling, you know, like you didn't have a voice or controlling and different things like that. But it was more like protect. What would kick in was like not fight or flight, but kind of like that fight or flight of like, okay, all right, this area is looking a little shaky to me. Okay, Victoria, what do you need to do? Okay. So immediately my mind started going into what we got to do. To, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And
so if you're listening, so you have people that are listening to us right now.
Yeah.
Right, they're driving or whatever, and they're like, dude, that's what I'm doing.
Yeah.
I can feel myself doing that right now because, you know what I mean? He was a moron this morning. So what do you do then? Like, what did you do? What in that moment, what did you do? Did you like...
In the beginning, I did not handle it the best. Because like you said, right, I didn't even know that I needed healing. So for me, it was just like protection. And so at first it was like, and those probably the moments where you kind of felt like, hey, you're a little distant. You're not talking as much. Yeah. Because it was my mind like, okay, Victoria. And it wasn't like, what are we going to do? Like leaving. That was like not that. It was more so like, okay,
like how you going to process it?
How are you going to process this? Okay, what do we need to do to maybe prevent this from happening? What do I need to do to brace myself if it does happen? Like all these different thoughts were going through my head. I know it was a lot. It was a lot going on there. And it was also fighting the fear of, oh no, is this what people were talking about? I don't want this to happen. Right. So in the beginning, it was like I probably overly processed it and stayed in it mentally and emotionally too long to where I just kind of like got quiet and reserved and withdrawn. And then as time went on, I learned, okay, let's just communicate. Let's talk about this. And so I would just say, hey, I noticed you're not doing this or that anymore. Why is that? Hey, I noticed blah, blah, blah. And so I chose to, instead of assuming like this is what is happening, that if it is indeed what is happening, to bring it up, to offer a chance to like fix it or to work on it. Instead of
that's what I appreciate though. But that's what I appreciate is you bringing it up to have the opportunity to fix it. Because I think sometimes either A, people don't bring it up. Yeah. And you're just like, well, this is just the way they are. Yeah. Or this is just the way it's going to be. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't have to be that way. But I would say on the flip side to it, though, is you have to be receptive. If your partner or somebody brings something up to you and is like, hey, this bothers me, I think you also can't get so defensive to where you're like, well, that's you.
And I think you also can't be like closed off to the possibility that may be true. Some people can be like, oh, no, not at all. That's not it. No, I think that's just how you're feeling. But if I'm feeling
it's like when you were like, listen, you are super attractive. And I was like, what? And I didn't want to get defensive. You're like, no. And I was like, what? No, not me. And then I looked at myself and I was like, right. I get what she's saying.
Yeah. That's exactly.
That's it. No. And once you got past that, it was over.
Yeah, because you had such a big head about, oh, I'm such a great looking guy. And I was like, I can't take it anymore. I don't know how I feel being the less attractive one in this relationship. Bring it down.
Man, there's so much revelation in this podcast. It's amazing.
Right. So yeah, I think the reason why though is because in giving you that opportunity, because the other way I was processing it wasn't working.
Yeah, no, it wasn't.
And also sometimes
you wouldn't talk to me for like a day.
I know. I'm sorry for that.
Sometimes 2. Sometimes 2 days. If it went 2 days, I was like, oops.
I'm not proud of that. But like I said, I have grown and healed. But it's like what you said. If I would have.
Well, let me rephrase that, though. You did talk to me. She did answer questions. It was just the answering of questions, and that was it. Be like, how was your day? Good.
Yeah, but the thing is like what you just said, though, right? Like, that was an unhealed version of me. And so I would have told her, hey, he's not that. Yeah. Because, like you said, I would have gotten to that place quicker. So those are things we wouldn't have had to experience. And I think I would even say to people that are still single, like, there are some things you will not know that is there until you are in a relationship. If it is a past trauma or trigger or something like that, you may not know that it's there until it is hit, right? And so I would say, like, do as much healing as you can before you do get into that committed relationship with someone, because it does save a lot of, like you said, unnecessaries that we could have avoided. And the crazy thing is like, before we got together, I really was confident in, like, I am healed. But looking back on it, I wasn't healed. I put a Band-Aid on it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I wasn't truly healed. I just put a Band-Aid on my past hurts, my past traumas. I put a Band-Aid on it, and the Band-Aids that I slapped on it was, I'm fine. I'm okay. The Band-Aids I slapped on it was walls that I put up to say, I'm not going to be in that situation again. And so it wasn't a place of coming to situations or in a relationship to where I was truly, fully whole. I was whole enough to be like, hey, I'm not dependent upon anybody, but it came from a hurt place, not a healed place.
Yeah, that makes sense.
You know what I mean? And so when I would be triggered, when I would whatever, it was Band-Aids that were being ripped and wounds being exposed, instead of a healed person being like, hey, Victoria, no, that's not the case. It's good.
Yeah. And there's a lot of times you don't even know that those things are there. It's like you could be single right now listening to us and you're like, I don't have that issue. Well, when you get together, sometimes you don't know this stuff is there until you're in the spot, right? Like, I didn't think I thought I was being super, like you said, I thought I was being super vulnerable back in the day, to where I was like, oh my gosh, I've never opened up like this in my life. And now I look back on it and I'm like, no, it was all kind of surface level opening up. But now, like, our relationship is so much stronger. It's so much deeper. It's so much, I know, like, okay, this is that person. This is the safe person. This is a person I don't have to worry about anything. I don't, in the sense of like how they will respond or stop talking or whatever. It's like, now I have that person. I wish I would have been way more open back at the beginning.
Yeah. And the thing is like, if we allow ourselves to be aware enough, I'm sure you can probably recognize it now before you even get into a relationship. Like, if a boss or a person off the street or something happens that triggers you in a way that's like, oh my gosh. I think if we really ask ourselves in those moments, like, okay, why did I respond that way? Why did I react that way? Why did that set me off? Why does that bother me? There's whatever it is. Like, I think if we ask those questions instead of, man, I hate when this happens. Okay, well, that could be a possibility. That means that something's deeper going on down in you.
Yeah.
But I think that I think nowadays the climate is different. I think the climate nowadays is very much so like teaching and wanting to be aware of self. Where I feel like back then, when we're younger, I don't think that was really much so a conversation and an understanding of like, hey, therapy is available. Hey, talking to somebody is available. I think we have, and I'm not going to say we, maybe I'll own my own, but I don't think that was something that was really talked about a lot. And I think that it wasn't, especially in my home, it wasn't displayed to have healthy conversations, right? And so if that's not displayed on how to have healthy conversations, if it's not displayed how to have a healthy processing of emotions, then I'm going to do the best that I can coming from that. You know what I'm saying? And I think that, now that it is a climate where that is like, hey, that's talked about, I think that it should be taken advantage of.
Yeah, 100%. I think that sometimes we can get into the mode of especially when you're single, it's, oh my gosh, I'm always finding the wrong person. It's always the wrong person. It's always the wrong person. Where sometimes it could be you.
And and
you could be the issue.
Yeah, and it's not the issue like you're this bad person.
No, but it's things you have to work on in order to grow with. Yeah. Like, if you're not willing to grow yourself, finding somebody is not going to help you grow.
And sometimes it's not even sometimes like I'm not willing to grow. Is that our walls have been up for so long of protecting ourselves, or our
Yep.
experiences have told us to respond now going forward in a different way, that we don't, you just no longer recognize that this is hurting me more than helping me.
Yeah. It's a good point.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
Well, I loved it today. I love it every single time that we talk. I think, too, is sometimes, we do these podcasts, and thank you for all the feedback that you give us, and it's awesome. But I also want to try to give you, like, if you're listening and you're married, like an action step almost. It's kind of like to do something. Here's what I would do. I would sit down with your spouse, and I would ask the same question that we asked. Hey, what would you tell our, when we first got married, what would you tell yourself then? Because you'd be surprised at what when you think about it, what really comes out.
is that the only thing? Is there anything else that you would say, hey, like you said, hey, Phil, it's okay to be vulnerable to Victoria? Is there something else, or was that it?
I mean, that was probably the main thing. I would say that, and this is the truth. Like, it's just not saying it because it's our podcast, but it's like, I would probably tell myself, you're going to be a lot happier than what you think you are. Like, you're going to be a lot happier than what you think.
Yeah.
And it's like, I wish I would have back in the day been like, hey, not constantly, especially when you have kids, you can be like, hey, when they start walking, it'll be great. When they start talking, when they start blah, blah, blah. Like, so from a kid's aspect, you want to enjoy every minute of when they're young.
Yeah.
And I would say when you're married or you first get married, enjoy every second of when you first get married.
Yeah. And in your marriage.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
What about you?
Oh, I wasn't expecting. Okay. Be kinder.
Yeah, you should.
Like,
you mean when we first?
I think, and I know hindsight 2020, and I don't think I was mean to you. At least I don't think I was. But I think that you're like looking at me like, you were. I hope I wasn't.
No, you weren't.
What I mean by kinder, I mean like, which is hard because I know the early Victoria was the Victoria that had a lot of ish to work through. So I am proud that I was able to be as present as I was in the midst of what I was dealing with. But with that being said, I wish that I would have known sooner how it was affecting you.
That's a good point.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, I didn't know. I mean, obviously, you took me to the restaurant. That's in another podcast. I forgot which episode.
What's that one?
But
Smart move, fellas.
That you did. You voiced it. But I just wish that I didn't put you in that position to where you had to voice it.
Yeah, well, live and learn, I guess.
But the thing is like, and I say that now, like I said, because I get on the healed version and all that, and everything happens for a reason. But I was and I think that's a message that I would give to somebody, that sometimes we can be in a place where we don't know that we need healing, and we don't realize how it is affecting those around us. And so the healing that needs to take place isn't just for you, but is also for those that are around you. You're not showing up to be a better version or a better person for yourself, but also for those around you.
That's good.
So
it's really good.
I don't want people to be so closed off to the mindset or the possibility of like, I don't have anything to work on. I'm good. I'm fine. And if you are at a place where you're like, hey, I know that I do have some things to work on, I just don't know how to get there, I would encourage you to find a little step, whether that is, if you can't afford a therapist, maybe start journaling, talking to a friend that you trust. If you're in a church, a pastor that you trust, something to start the ball rolling.
Yeah.
But don't just sit in. I know I'm not in a good place, but I just don't know how to get there, because it's like you're just prolonging a healing that needs to take place.
Yeah. Taking steps to get healthy.
Yes.
I love it.
Yes. So that's. I mean, obviously there's other things as well, but I would say those were my main two.
Well, hey, I want you to take this. I want you to ask your spouse what it is.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Get with them. Ask them, hey, what would you tell your younger self?
Yeah.
So we appreciate you watching the podcast all the time, being a part of the podcast, your support. It's awesome. Thank you so much for it.
Yes, we have thoroughly enjoyed it. If you're watching us on YouTube, thank you so much. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't subscribed already. We also have our podcast on Apple and Spotify. Obviously, if you're currently listening, please share with a friend and give us a follow. Leave a review if you haven't already. This episode. After this episode, we're gonna take like a 2-week break. So this would probably be, I would classify the ending of our first season.
Season 1 is over.
The ending of our first season. But we're going to take a 2-week break, and we are going to come right back, with more things to share and guests to speak with, and just, hopefully continue to help, the best way we know and can.
Yeah, and if you want to let us know, like, hey, I'd love for you to talk about this or whatever, send us. You can follow us individually on Instagram, or go to Love Encompassed Podcast on Instagram. Let us know, DM us, and we would love to talk about what you want to talk about. So thank you so much, and we'll see you soon in season 2.
Season 2.